Welcome to our next webinar, ladies and gentlemen. We got Eric over here. Well, I'm looking for the lady. She's just listening. So, but yet, lady and gentlemen, and then all the ladies and gentlemen watching. Welcome everybody back to our Chain Bites webinar. We do these relatively often. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm your host, Mike Salvi, stand-up comic, sales associate, and Steven Segal's nephew. So I'm here in the Chain Bites. This is where I keep all my secret machines. And I want to introduce everybody. We have our CEO of BTM Compliance, Jeremy Snyder, and Eric Grill, the CEO of Chain Bites. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for being here. And I always love being the host. It's always a great time. So if you have any questions, send them in the chat, and we'll address them as we go through. Today, we're here to talk about banking challenges in the Bitcoin ATM industry and how to overcome them. So we'll go over a few different things. One announcement is Sasha Hodder. I know a lot of people are here just to see Sasha Hodder. I'd like to believe you're here to see me and everybody else, but I know a lot of people are here to see Sasha. Unfortunately, she got booked at the Madison Square Garden for a different BTM. Now, she had an emergency. She can't be with us, but she will be with us in a future. She sends her best wishes to everybody. So she'll be with us on a future webinar. So first, to get started, just to let you guys know what we're all covering. So if you want to write some of these down, see what we cover, and if we miss any of it, call us to the carpet. So we're going to cover how to start your Bitcoin ATM business, what AML and KYC compliance looks like, with the banking industry regulations you need to comply with, and how to secure a bank account, how to create your compliance program, and to respond to banking questions. And then we'll open up the end for a Q&A and go from there. So Jeremy, you want to kick it off?
Awesome. So I think probably the first part is probably more appropriate for Eric to kind of talk through, but it's really how to start your Bitcoin ATM business.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to use Armored Car Service, which if you're going to be an enterprise operator, you're going to want an Armored Car Service. You're going to want either S&G locks or one of the locks that your Armored Car Service is going to use. We typically use Sergeant Greenleaf locks. They're pretty standard and they're easy to supply, and that works with pretty much every armored car operator. The one-way versus two-way makes it a little bit more complicated with the Armored Car Service. You just need to train them so they understand to dump it versus just coming and taking it, or what they're used to, which is just depositing it.
Absolutely.
I mean, of course, on the other side is once you have that in place, then you need, and that's where I guess Jeremy fits in, is the compliance program. You're going to need to get the bank in order to work with the Armored Car Service. But from a physical machine standpoint, yeah, you want to make sure that you have the right locks and auditable.
One of the things that I'd also say in there too is that having a two-way machine versus one-way also has an advantage. A lot of the banks, in order for them to bank you and accept the risk, some of them actually have a transactional requirement that they want to see that an operator meets. So some of those startups, obviously have a harder time building up to those higher numbers. Some of those that we've seen are like 200K monthly. So obviously having only a one-way machine where you're only taking those transactions in, two-way obviously benefits you by being able to take that additional amount of transactions and helps you kind of get to those higher revenue numbers too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the hardest part, is when you're small, the banks there's all risk and there's nothing in it for them. So it's a lot harder to do. So you don't want to limit yourself with the wrong types of machines as well. So I guess we should talk about compliance, because that's really going to be your next step. And you're going to need to talk intelligently to a bank about compliance. Otherwise, they're really not going to take you seriously. I guess, Jeremy, you're better suited to this. You've dealt with a lot of different banks and trying to get people onboarded and different requirements. But in general, maybe you can talk about the program they want to see, some of the differences even between the banks and what they want to see. The travel rule, I know, is a big sticking point with some of the banks.
Yeah, so I would say probably the first key is not engaging with the bank before you're actually ready to have those conversations. And I think you just alluded to that. Being able to eloquently have a conversation, with a bank and be able to describe, the standard functions of your compliance program are going to be some of the key conversations that you're going to have, with that bank and whoever is accepting that application from you. So making sure that you understand compliance before you go into those conversations obviously will help you have a greater chance of success of having an account open. So some of the things that they're going to look for right off the bat are going to be that obviously you have your money services business registered with FinCEN. If you have that, you also have an AML or an anti-money laundering program that also has all of the KYC information spelled out in it, all of the controls. Those are the documents that we over at BTM Compliance actually draft. So we custom draft an AML program for each operator's business that has each and every one of these pieces of information that's in it. So we would advise you, if before you went to a bank, obviously, to fully review your AML and your KYC policy, understand what's inside of it, be able to respond to some of the simple questions about, how are you filing, the different reports? When do those reports, get filed, or what kicks those things off? How does your machine function? What cryptocurrencies are you selling at it? There's a lot of different pieces that they're going to want to test you on in order to kind of see, what is your baseline knowledge and how are you going to run this business? At the end of the day, each one of these policies are based off of risk, but banks also, will accept or decline, building or setting up an account for you based off of your risk as a business. So if you're able to kind of speak to those things, they're going to be more apt to help you through that process.
And here's another little secret. A lot of people go into your third-party audit. You don't technically have to do it for a year, but if you try to go into the bank without a third-party audit, you're definitely going in there without fully armed. They would love to see somebody else that took a look at this and said, okay, here's what they're doing right. So I always suggest to people to do that. And they're like, well, I don't have to do that for a year. Yeah, you don't, but it's going to help you with the bank.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Another one that you could do in addition to that would be just having a business risk assessment that obviously addresses all of the key risks of your business and puts them, basically front and center for a financial institution to review. And a lot of the compliance teams, the BSA compliance teams of a bank, they're going to use those things in order to really determine out the risk. And the risk could be something, along the lines of geographically, where are your machines located, the different types of cryptocurrency.
Jeremy, you say risk a lot, right? But honestly,
yeah,
that's how you talk to the bank. They want to hear that
it
word.
is.
Every other word is risk. That I've addressed this risk. I've looked at this risk, because that's what they're going to throw at you. So it's funny that you just keep saying the word risk and risk assessment, because that is exactly what they're looking for.
It is. Everything that they have there is decision making based off of risk. And it's the same thing, or the same approach that you're going to take in this business, understanding, which transactions to take and which ones that you won't. And so those are ultimately the things that a bank will be looking at. And so if you want to set yourself up for success, be able to kind of speak to those risks of your business and be able to do it well with the bank.
I'm glad you brought that up, because calls I take with a lot of customers, these questions come up. Some on occasion, I get what it's like being eager to, and on the surface, Bitcoin is just something different than what the banks are used to, and banks are used to dealing with money. So, to run in and, with the level of excitement that a lot of us have when, we discover Bitcoin, especially for people that want to get into this business, to rush in and just, you don't want to call every bank and say, imagine if, if Pepsi was the only thing that exists, all of a sudden you came up with Coke and you're like, can I put this in your, in your machines too? And what are you talking about? Just give it a few minutes. So of the banking advice that I never give, one of those things is try not to talk to them until at the very least you've done, some homework for sure. But
yeah, and there are some things that you can also set yourself up for success with coming in. Understanding that if you have a state requirement, or I should say, whether you do or don't have a state requirement for, let's say, a money transmission license, an MTL, being able to go in there and have that conversation to where you can confidently say, hey, I've already, done the legwork, I've done due diligence, I understand that I need one, I'm in the process of actually getting that application completed. Or, hey, I've already engaged and I've sent the state, a no action or a no opinion letter. You can obviously consult with an attorney who can assist you with services like that. Those things set you up and show the serious nature of your intentions of actually running this operation or this business.
So next, question I get pretty often is about the training, the compliance training that comes along with this package that you guys offer too. So can we talk about that?
Yeah. So training obviously is paramount. In order to kind of be able to speak to these things, you have to go through training, but it's also a federal requirement. So the Bank Secrecy Act does spell out that you are required in order to have regular BSA compliance training. They don't have so much as a timetable or a specified or required amount. It just states that you should have regular BSA compliance training. So our organization, in order to help operators meet that, we actually just go ahead and we produce training content that is in very nice bite-sized consumable segments. We find that it's a lot harder to try to get everybody's attention for, let's say, an hour or several hours and do that all at one go. Being able to do this quarterly, we present, very nice topics around BSA compliance, something that you can complete both the training and a very short, 5 to 10 question quiz in under 30 minutes, and then turn in that material back to us. And then we help you maintain a training roster and a log that you're able to provide, to your bank to show that you, the rest of your team, have taken that training. And we also spell out, the initial training that really needs to be handled by each operator and the staff that's going to be involved in the business inside your AML program. But then we also have the supplemental, additional training topics that we put out quarterly.
And a lot of times they're relevant to the industry. A lot of times we're trying to fit this old industry and the money laundering and things like that. And things don't work like that with the machines. So a lot of times it's good training on what's real world, what's really going on here, and updating people that may not be aware of what's going on in their machines. So it's a little different, and it's better. I mean, quarterly training is more often than it's required, but it's actually relevant training.
You brought up some of the things with the Bank Secrecy Act requires. So can we go through some of the banking industry regulations that you need to comply with?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So in addition to training, obviously that is a requirement, having a compliance officer or a compliance officer that has been appointed and designated. So that's the request that you're going to hear from a bank. They're going to want to see a designation of a compliance officer. You'll have a section usually or typically inside your AML program that actually spells out who is the compliance officer, what are the duties that they're going to be handling in the day-to-day operations, and how they hold you as an operator to the actual controls that are within that AML program. But additionally, usually banks want to see an actual formal declaration, or designation of a compliance officer that is its own independent document. We obviously are here to help you with that. We can provide those documents for you. And usually the bank will have that in their checklist for their application process. Another thing that they're going to want to see besides the compliance officer is really, your AML program itself. They're going to look at the completeness in order to make sure that it meets all of the regulations that the bank itself has to follow. And Eric kind of talked to that. There are some things that are not regulations that are on the books per se, but there are standard practices that banks as financial institutions have to follow, and sometimes they pass those things along to the operator themselves. So
yeah,
one of the
I think
ones
that's
that
one
was
of the
just,
struggles is just that is that they're a bank and they apply bank rules to us as a money service business, and we're not even regulated by the state. We're just regulated by the feds for anti-money laundering. So there's a disconnect there, and they want us to do a lot of things that they're used to requiring from people that are both registered in the state and on a federal level, and it doesn't apply to us, and they're kind of unsure of what to do about it. And there aren't enough banks really out there that handle money service businesses that you can go shopping around. So you're really beholden to whatever they want to come up with, and some of them add a lot of rules that aren't necessarily required, but they're going to require them, and they can do that because you don't have a whole lot of choices.
Yeah. So some of the common things that you're going to see, they're going to have tier levels inside your AML program, and the banks may either agree or disagree with some of those tier levels. They may ask you to go through and make some modifications. Obviously, we can help cater to some of those things, as long as you as an operator are willing to accept those requirements. Typically, what I would do in a consultation with operators is I always tell them, when you're going in and you're ready to talk to the bank about opening up a bank account, ask them, say, what are the minimum BSA requirements, for a money services business in order to have a bank account open? Know what those things
They
are
probably
before you
don't
start
know.
an application process.
They don't know.
And hopefully they do. Hopefully they do.
I think
There
it's
are
getting
some
better. I
banks that
think
have a list.
with some of the newer banks that are banking money service businesses and Bitcoin ATMs in particular, they're starting to get more comfortable with how it works and who's serious and here's what we require. And so you can determine whether you want to bank with them based upon what their requirements are. But I think that's going to get better. I think as they get more comfortable with the industry and they see that, in fact, these are pretty good tools to stop money laundering. That's not really the issue going on. It's more of the scams and other things at the machines that they'll be more
That's right.
comfortable.
Yeah.
And we
Obviously,
can do a better job than they can do of stopping them. We see that across our operators is that we stop a lot of the scams, and they're not able to do that. So they could learn something from our industry.
Obviously, when somebody's starting as an operation, they can learn all those details. But is there a list of, like, since you guys mentioned that not all banks are the same, is there just like a list of like just common like bullet point requests, like for just certain things that they want to know? Like you guys talked about source of funds. Like, is there a
well, they want to see an
list?
enhanced due diligence. It's kind of like your Title 31 audit from the IRS. So if you're going to get audited by them, that's a Bank Secrecy Act. What they're going to go through, they're going to require the same things. They're going to want to see that you're executing on your compliance program. They're going to want to see a risk-based assessment of things, and they're going to want to see that you're actually implementing that.
Yeah. So some of the common things that we see is like banks, or some banks do not want to see any transactions where you collect up very limited information. Some of them want to see that for the second that you start taking a dollar, that you have SMS verification, so you have something tied to it. Others say, hey, we want to see a full name and an SMS verification collected, starting at $1. And then once you get into your higher tiers, starting at like $1,000, collecting up, the government ID. And then that's, they start dictating more and more as it starts to go up. The travel rule or the funds, transfer rule of the Social Security collection at $3,000 is kind of a 50-50 between that. There are some banks that say, hey, we want to see that every single individual that makes a transaction is being OFAC sanction screened along with PEP. If that's the case, then you have an understanding, knowing going into it, that when you take even $1 from somebody, because they have that requirement, you should be collecting up an ID and then having the sanction searches go along with that. So that does mean that there is a higher touch point for the compliance officer in order to review each and every single transaction to ensure that those things have happened. Versus, some banks may say, hey, you want to know what? We're not so concerned with that until it gets into the higher transaction tiers, or, we are okay with not having Social Security collection until the required, 10,000, or over limit, that is required for the currency transaction report, or the CTR filing.
I'll tell you what'll get you not banked really quick is the operators who seem to think if they stay under $3,000 that they don't need to do any of this. No bank is even going to talk to you. I mean, that should tell you a lot right there.
Yeah. Some of the other things that you may see, they may ask you to have some additional policies, written in there. Eric kind of talked about the enhanced due diligence. Enhanced due diligence is pretty wide ranging. And so there's a lot that could actually be asked for inside enhanced due diligence. Sometimes you may hear of a bank say, hey, we want something that's very specific that talks about elder exploitation. So a great example of that. Yeah, a great example of that would be someone making a transaction of $10,000 or more that's over the age of 60, and the banks are wanting to see that you've gone through and that you've done basically an extra interview of that person in order to evaluate the risk and ensure that they're not being scammed, or that they're not going to be having money taken from them or being coerced in making the transaction.
That's the majority of what you do in the Bitcoin ATM space is these scams. That's what's going on here is people are being scammed and unaware that they're being scammed. So that's where you're really able to do a lot with anti-money laundering, more so than the traditional smurfing and things like. You see a little of that sometimes, but it's not a really good tool for it, and they figure that out pretty quickly. However, the scams along with gift cards has become, a tool that they use.
Some banks are very friendly as far as accepting, verbal source of funds statements from the transaction, customers. And so if you're documenting those things down, sometimes they're okay with that. Some of them have a value or a threshold where they say, hey, at a certain point, we're going to want you to collect up actual source of fund documentation in order to, provide us some surety of where are they, getting these funds from, where were they taken from. At the end of the day, it's really not your job to investigate these things. FinCEN makes that also clear, that really your job is to report these things. So asking good questions, and if you question some of the source of fund information without having to go through a long drawn out policy, you could just use your gut on that too and request some of those documents when something doesn't feel right or doesn't make sense. But obviously, if a bank is going to pass something on to you and they say, hey, at $25,000, we want to see, maybe bank statements, we want to see some paychecks that show that you have the occupation and you have
but you can address this up
salary.
front. Like you know this, they're going to ask you for this stuff. That what I think is good is that they're actually talking to us. Before they would just close the accounts, not talk to you at all. They would just say, no, we don't do MSBs. Now they're talking to us and asking us questions and working with us. In some cases, they don't understand why. And so they're requesting this information. And if you can explain why it's not relevant to what you're doing, but you're addressing it in a different way, that you understand the risks, that's what they want to hear. And then they'll change, we've seen them change their mind, believe it or not. They change their mind on some things. Travel rules, some of these banks will give up on that one, but neither will FinCEN. So I guess we're stuck with it.
One of the other ones that I've seen that has really started to pop up a lot, and I think that most operators are going to see this come into play probably with every bank, is the use of a blockchain's forensic software tool. And so banks are starting to ask, and they're saying, hey, so what tools are you using in order to monitor the wallets that are coming through, to monitor the people, to be able to, conduct real, enhanced due diligence by looking at, let's say, the transactions of a person and the wallet that they've just presented to you in order to kind of match those things up. So they may ask you for that. It's not obviously a requirement, but they may ask you for that, and they may tell you that that's something that you have to have. And BTM compliance does utilize some blockchain forensics. We use a tool from BIG, or the Blockchains Intelligence Group, and we use BitRank specifically in order to really start looking at the wallets. And I know that the Chainbytes team has actually done a really good job of integrating, that into their dashboard. So we have an API key that's available to be used by any of the operators that are utilizing our compliance services, but also a Chainbytes machine will put in our API key. So in real time, when a wallet is scanned, we're actually, calling that wallet through the API, and we're getting a ranking, and it usually will return some interesting information. It will tell us, is this a neutral wallet? Has it never really had many transactions? Or, it's a wallet that's in good standing. But it also can tell us things like, hey, this wallet is actually featured on an OFAC list. You shouldn't be doing anything with it. It's absolutely sanctioned. Or, hey, this belongs to a known scammer or has been involved directly in scams before. So we have that.
Okay. We got a lot of, I like this audience, by the way, because they're not just like, they're listening, but they're like listening, because these are some really good questions and a lot of stuff that was brought up. And they're paying attention even for sure too. Eric, you appreciate you addressing that. Even somebody even said, hey, Eric, why don't you move the mic a little closer to your mouth?
That better.
But now we got you. So I'd like to ask a couple of these I'm just the messenger, okay? Stab me not. All right. But I got now a couple questions came up. One was, what is a no opinion letter exactly? And do I need one in California?
It's a really good question. Yeah. So a no opinion letter is really a letter that is addressed to the state about your business and about the state's opinion in regards to whether your business needs to apply or has, the obligation to have a money transmitter license. A lot of the states actually post the opinions of virtual currency out on their state websites. So the regulators, they don't want to have any of the additional work. Obviously, if you send them a letter, they're obligated in order to respond to you. So that's a time commitment and a money commitment in order to giving you that response. So for example, in this question, the state of California has been very kind, and they probably responded to a lot of these letters to the point where they actually have it publicly posted, a response letter that banks will accept that says, hey, if you're selling this and it's a peer-to-peer, transaction business model where you're selling cryptocurrency that you own directly to an individual,
yeah, that's
you
too
are not
complicated.
required to
Get a
have
lawyer just to say, here, do this, and have the lawyer letter.
What
So
you
the
said sort
opinion
of
letter is
addresses
simply that, either an opinion letter from a lawyer saying that you don't need to register, or they send a no action letter to the state and they respond with saying, yes, you're correct. You don't need to register, which is obviously the best letter, because then you've got it right from the horse's mouth. You don't need to register.
That's pretty close to addressing the next question, which is, and again, I'm quoting here. I've seen some websites online state that certain states require that you only operate one ways, or you have to get an money transmitter license. Is this true? And I've seen other states say it's not true. Which is the best way to find out?
An attorney.
Yep. I think we
My
have a
opinion,
consensus on
my
that.
opinion that's not true. They try to look at the legalese in the law and say that this doesn't apply or this does apply because of that. Most of the banking commissioners have made some sort of opinion on how they view this, and I haven't seen any that said anything about one way or two way. I don't think they understand what the difference is. So I don't think that's true. But ask
I
a
have
lawyer.
not. I have not seen that either.
I've heard it before.
Okay. Is training necessary for getting a bank account?
Absolutely. They will want to see not only the training that your compliance officer and the certifications that your compliance officer will have completed, but they're going to want to see that every individual that is involved in your operation has completed the initial training that is spelled out inside your AML program and policy.
Yeah, and Jeremy's teams provides that, but yeah, you definitely don't want to walk into the bank and not be able to answer their compliance questions. That is not going to go well.
It's usually the first indicator that you haven't
back.
completed your training.
Because then you got to come back with a mustache the next week. You got to, look up for maybe.
You might as well just go to another bank. They're never going to forget you.
Right. Another question that came in was, how does an operation get banking if they are starting up and have under $200,000 a month in volume?
That's a great question. So there are other alternative, ways in order to go through and complete banking. I know that there are cash vaulting services where, obviously you'll still have to use an armored vehicle or a cash logistics company that comes through and does a chain of custody on your cash. They pick it up, they bring it back to a vault. They count it, make sure that it matches up with everything that came out of your smart empty from your machine. And then they deposit that into their own account and they make a purchase of cryptocurrency on your behalf. And then they transfer that over to your hot wallet. And obviously, usually they do those things for a fee. There's a percentage. Those can, vary greatly depending on who you're utilizing for that. But it's a great intermediary, solution until you can get a traditional bank account. And there are some people who are very comfortable and do that long term.
Okay. Next question. Now we're going to save that one. Majority of big banks have shown me the door. Are there banks that are more friendly?
Yeah, the bigger the banks, almost none of the big banks will do MSBs anymore. Operation Choke Point pretty much ended all of the large banks wanting to get involved in the industry. So There are banks that cater towards this industry, and there's quite a few of them now.
So essentially, if Samuel L. Jackson or Kevin Hart's in the commercial, don't call them.
Probably.
Like if I'm in the commercial, they'll probably take you. Okay.
Yeah, they
So
probably they'll at least talk to you to
to-
find until they find out what you do, and then they'll show you the door.
Right.
Yeah, but local banks want to be competitive, and so they're able to take risks that the large banks aren't able to do. So that tends to be who does this.
Yeah, I would say the best way to start on that is really to just go out there and Google MSB friendly banks. Start there. If a bank has the ability to open up bank accounts for, and I use this, extremely broadly, the term money services businesses, because it applies to more than just cryptocurrency. It's check cashing, it's foreign currency exchanges.
Yeah, this is not a Bitcoin specific problem. This is a money service. This is a cash business problem.
Right.
That there's cryptocurrency involved just confuses them, but it doesn't make the real issue is just cash and tracking. Cash is very hard to track, so there's more risk to it. And at the end of the day, the bank is going to be held liable for that. So they're gonna. That's why they do what they're doing on us. Is they want all their risks addressed.
Okay.
But asking them if they accept, or open up accounts for money service businesses is a great place to start. And, as soon as you've asked them, then you'll kind of know where the direction of that conversation is going to go. And then you can kind of explain to them what your business model is. And this is why having that education on what your business model is, how compliance functions, obviously benefits you. And then they're able to tell you right away. Or they may turn you away. But there are some larger banks out there. I've heard that Chase isn't completely out, that there have been some people who have successfully got through that. Another one that I just heard, I can't validate this, but Synovia Bank, it just really depends on if they're going to be friendly to MSBs and then specifically crypto. So ask them.
Yeah, I mean, so the problem with the big banks is you deal with a business manager who's going to work on the business accounts, but there's going to be a compliance officer local, and then there's another compliance officer regionally, and they're the ones that are the problem, and they're the ones that are going to say no without even talking to you. And that's the bigger it is, the more of the bureaucracy. And it only takes one person in that process to just say absolutely not, and it's over. But I have also heard people at Chase, of all banks, they seem to be the most crypto unfriendly, but able to get accounts. So who knows?
Okay. Shifting over to compliance. When it comes to pricing, I saw that the standard was $150 a month per machine. At what number of Bitcoin ATMs does that drop, and what does that tier pricing look like? And we're talking about for a compliance officer per machine.
Yeah. So our standard is $150 per month per machine. And that goes from basically one machine all the way up to your 10th machine. The second that you roll over from your 10th to your 11th machine, we consider you a large operator, and then we give you a discount. And so what we do is we actually flat rate out our compliance services by the month. So in other words, your 11th through your 20th machine, we complete all the compliance services, and we do that for a flat fee of $1,000 per month. And then once you've rolled over your 20th machine to your 21st, so we go in groups of 10, so 21 through 30 machines would be $1,500, and then so on and so on. And then eventually, if you continue to expand and you become, a really large operator, which I would say an enterprise, grade operator, you'll know when we need to start having discussions about, negotiating out your rate. Typically, it's going to be based off of, the number of transaction or transactional volume that you have. And what we use to do that is we price you based off of the number of, FTEs or full-time employee, like compliance officer, that would be required to do that level of effort or that work for you. And then the benefit to us is that obviously we take the overhead of having those employees on staff, and we're managing them. And really what you're paying is just for that work to be done. And that comes as a significant cost savings to you, because the average compliance officer is going to be a six-figure salary easy, and they're going to want benefits.
Okay. Okay, another question. I was recently at Las Vegas in, they said the name of the casino, but I don't say names unless I get endorsements. So they were at a casino in Vegas, which had Bitcoin ATM machines all over. They checked the spread and they were charging essentially a 20% spread. Is there any compliance considerations on the spread, and is there an industry standard on the transaction fees?
I'll let Eric talk to it because it has nothing to do with compliance.
well, it doesn't have anything to do with compliance. Whatever you charge as far as your spread, they don't care. They don't get involved in that. 20% is probably on the high end, but it depends on Vegas. Vegas, they need to register their machines with the city as well, so they have quite a bit of overhead there. There's very few people operating there, so I would say, that's probably a reasonable charge in that area. Although that sounds like a lot to most people. Yeah, well, if you're operating in Vegas, you're probably paying quite a bit.
Okay. Another question. Do you know where I can find cash and transit services that like local services, smaller ATMs like Brinks or Garda?
Google. So you look for, you look for armored car service, cash and transit services. In Pennsylvania, they're registered, so they're easy to find. There's a bunch of them out there. They are probably a lot easier to deal with than the armored car service, but start with your bank, and then whoever the bank partners with, if they don't care, you can use whoever you want. You might be better off with a smaller armored car service, but typically they'll have a relationship with one of the big guys, which if you can get them trained working properly is all right. But they've kind of not been so great to deal with the large armored car services.
Okay. Another question that came in is, can Bitcoin ATM operators sell to foreigners in the United States?
Absolutely. They don't differentiate between citizenship or where somebody's from. As long as they're not on an OFAC list, and as long as they're not doing anything illicit, they're welcome to use the machines.
Okay.
They will still have to provide ID, and we'll still have to go through, the same compliance that we go through, but they'll just have to provide it, and then we'll have to do the validation process of that ID.
Although I'm not a lawyer, I'm not providing legal advice on that.
Yeah.
Me neither. Okay, so we have two questions. One from somebody in the chat says, if you were to add a check cashing to the Bitcoin ATM, is a license to cash checks required in each state? And what does that process entail? Basically, is it easy or difficult?
It's an easy process. I can tell you, in the state of Pennsylvania, you need bonding, you need the money transmitter license, you need an audit, I think every year or every 2 years from the state. So it's a pretty thorough process, and they definitely keep tabs on you. It's a completely different licensing regime than Bitcoin ATM, so you'll need a whole new license. Is it hard? No, it's pretty easy. It's expensive though.
You'll also, in addition, need another, AML policy that's very specific to that. Obviously, the compliance policies that you'd be using for your Bitcoin ATM aren't going to cover, likely all of the controls that would be required in that industry. So seeking out legal advice would definitely be advised by us.
Okay. Another question that came in was, are there any tips or recommendations for acquiring and maintaining money transmitter licenses across multiple states?
Yeah, that's another great one for an attorney. I wish Sasha would have been able to be here for that, but
There is a uniform code, which they're trying to do, but as of right now, it's difficult. You're just going to have what states do you want to operate in? What do you need? Most states, you still don't need an MTL license from a state level with the machines. But again, it's going to depend on the location and what your attorney says.
Yeah, you can also look at NMLS on their website, and they do have an application for if you're applying for like 3 or more, and there is a process for that. I haven't had any operators that had, I'll just say, the unfortunate luck of having to operate in 3 concurrent states that they need or required an MTL in. Like Eric said, a majority of the states do
I
not
still think
have
you'd be
that
better off going one by one, because each state,
Absolutely.
we've run into different hiccups with different states. So I wouldn't put them all in at one time.
It also gives you the opportunity, like Eric said, to learn and understand what is their requirements going to be. Some of them just have quarterly, what they call a call report, where you're actually reporting the transaction values and the transaction numbers to the state. And then there are other ones where they want to see a bit more information and they are a bit more involved, and they're able to do that.
Okay. Here's a question for Jeremy, and that is, how do you keep your beard so fresh? And by the way, it didn't come to Jeremy. This did not come to me. This is apparently mine's not fresh. It's a real question. It's in the chat.
I have no idea. I guess genetically I was blessed with this. So
yeah, okay. All right, sounds good. Yeah, I don't have any tips for mine either. So and Eric has no beard, so he has nothing to add. A lot of compliments coming from some of the operators that are here joining the chat too, that seem to be learning some things. So you know, I just wanted to acknowledge you guys. Hello, thanks. I'm not going to read all the compliments of how great we are and how you guys are like saying how, you know, our support is fantastic. I'm not going to read all these comments to everybody and all the thanks for our time and expertise. I'm not going to read all these thank yous. Okay, moving on.
The one thing I would say is prepare. If you're gonna get banking, you have to be prepared. You have to know what you're talking about. You know, get with Jeremy's team. They understand who to talk to. You know, Bankline's another good resource for finding banks once you're a little larger, and I think they do have some programs for smaller operators as well. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your compliance, and you're going to have to talk intelligently to whoever you're going to go through. And if you can't do that, nobody's going to give you an account. So you really are going to have to educate yourself on the compliance side.
Okay. This is a very important question. So thanks for asking it, Chatter. How long does the entire process take from getting machines to compliance to banking until the point that my machines are selling Bitcoin? So after you get off the phone with me, you place your order.
Well, if all you need to do is register on a federal level, it should what takes Jeremy a week, 2 weeks.
2 weeks is what Vincent tells us to tell everybody. It's usually about 6 to 7 business days is what, you know, FinCEN response time is to an application.
Now, so typically level, it could be months.
Yeah, the state is a total gamble. I mean, so first off, you have to understand, you know, how many people may be in the process. If it's not as popular of a request in that state, it may go fast, and for that reason, it may take, you know, a lot longer because they're not educated in the process, because they don't do a lot of them. So it's a gamble. From what I have been told by at least 2 very credible crypto attorneys, Sasha being one of them, is that you should expect about a 3-month, sometimes even 6-month, you know, determination as far as whether you're going to get that license approved or not. There are a lot of things that you can do in order to help speed that up. And that's understanding the process, understanding what's inside your compliance, because as their own regulating body, they're going to ask you a whole bunch of these questions too. They're going to want to know exactly how your AML works. They're going to ask you, what do you anticipate your annual transaction, you know, total number will be? And that's going to help them determine what surety bond, you know, amount that they're going to, you know, basically request from you. Understanding if you have to have audited financials. You have to have audited financials. That comes at a cost, and that's also, you know, another vendor that you have to engage in order to have them complete that. And what that time takes in order to do that, you know, could take you know, a considerable amount of time, like 60 to 90 days just to complete that. So I think that having an understanding that there is a time period there, but know that you can also engage and start doing a lot of this stuff concurrently. There have been some issues running into where an MTL license process requires you to have a bank account number and routing number in order for them to fully process it. And then the bank is saying, hey, before we'll give you your bank account, we want to see that you have an MTL license. And so this is kind of one of those disconnects, you know, between, you know, state and Fed and banks and states and the Fed. So one of those things that obviously an attorney can help you through. A lot of them just want to see that you have an application process, and that everything else is kind of forthcoming. It all comes together concurrently usually. So
but there
best
are,
case,
there are not a lot of states that require the money, the Bitcoin ATM machines to register, because of what he was just talking about with the surety bond is protecting consumer protection. Since we're not holding funds, we're not involving third party. We're not required in some states, most states.
Yeah, I would say typical timeline, you start your compliance, you have your compliance done in probably about 2 weeks to 4 weeks, a little bit longer if you're slower in getting us the information that you need. You usually that comes right on the heels of your machines arriving, then you're programming them. You're spending some time in order to go out there and find your locations and get those commitments, and you're having them installed. And if you have to have that MTL, then those things are obviously the last bit and piece that you're waiting on, along with your bank.
Yeah,
but
I always
usually
recommend
they line up.
Don't go to a state that needs an MTL to do your first machine. Start off easy. It's start operating, learn the business first before you have to deal with all the regulatory stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so two questions here is well, now I ask them separately. Where's the best place to keep up with federal regulations in this industry?
Oh wow, there's so many different places. Personally, I look a lot with ACAMs. I spend a lot of time going through different webinars, reading articles. You can set up RSS feeds through Google in order to advise you on federal compliance as it relates to Bitcoin ATMs. I have one. If there's news that's related to anything Bitcoin ATM related, it'll pop up. Usually it creates some really good morning reading as you're getting your day started. And as far as statewide, you can look at the state websites. You can also get involved with local groups, and usually there's plenty of people who that's their job, and they actually will keep you informed. And then also, if you're using us for compliance, if we hear about those things, obviously we're going to pass those along to you too.
Okay. Well, yeah, that answers the next question, which was specific. It said, "Is there a first stop place to research compliance for the state of Texas?" So,
well, Texas is actually kind of unique. They were one of the first states to what everyone calls the Texas guidance. They came out with guidance on how they viewed things should be regulated. And one of the things they said about specifically with the Bitcoin ATMs was if you're not involving a third party, if you're selling direct from there is no consumer protection issue. And so most states just copy and pasted what Texas did. But again, you'd want to talk to an attorney. Typically, what you want to research is the banking commissioner. So the banking commissioner in Texas would be the one giving the guidance. He's the one that would have the authority to register. And most other states, that's their title.
These are some great questions.
I told you, this is a great audience. They're here, they're paying attention, they're listening. They're like, we've done okay.
Yeah, Texas is one of the easiest states. They've been very Bitcoin friendly from the beginning, and they've tried to get out of the way of most of it. So it's definitely one of the easy states.
This question shifts a little away from compliance, but how long does it typically take for you to determine if a location is going to be profitable or not before you may move to another location?
I give it at least 3 months, but we've held on longer, and sometimes locations are just slow to get started and we can't figure out why. And then all of a sudden they pop and they start operating, and we're glad we didn't give up on them. It's very few machines that we've had to pull out because we just didn't think they were doing well. But yeah, I would say at least 3 months, depending on how many machines you have. That's why another reason it's good to have a lot of machines, because if one fails or one is in a location not doing well, hopefully all the other ones made up for that.
Okay. When you brought up Armored Car Service before, question came in about SNG locks. So the question was, are your machines compliant with SNG locks, and do you print out the receipt the Armored Car Service is asking for in order to work with us?
So there's different types of SNG locks. There's auditable locks there where they have a system of a two-factor authentication and they come up to it. At the end of the day, we provide a printout from the machine telling them how much cash is in there. They accept that. The SNG lock is simply logging that such and such a person came at this time and opened the vault. So we don't really need to do anything specific with SNG. It's not integrated into the software. It's simply a hardware piece with its own logging mechanism.
Okay. Another question that just popped in was, what exactly does Bankline offer?
Maybe you want to take that, Jeremy. Banking.
So
they
yeah,
they understand what the banks are looking for, so they can certainly be a big help in onboarding you into different banks. Again, like anyone, the smaller you are, the less experience you have, the more difficult it'll be. But they can certainly help anyone with that. And you can connect with Jeremy, and you can connect you with them. They sort of work together and know what everybody is looking for. So.
yeah.
Hey,
So
this is new
Bankline,
too. Just got to pop up.
Bank
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say to further expand on what Eric said. Bankline actually they establish banking partnerships with different financial institutions, and so they're able to go ahead and offer those different services depending on which bank wants to kind of take those. And that's where some of those requirements as far as like transactional, monthly value kind of come into play. Obviously, banks are looking at risk. If you're making a decent amount of money and they're also going to be making money, they may decide to go ahead and accept your risk as long as you're able to accept some of those BSA compliance requirements. So that's kind of how they work. And they also have some relationships established with the cash vaulting vendors also. So I think that's more where the startup and the low volume transaction operators are going in order to get their banking services initially.
Okay. By the way, if you're not watching this live, if you're watching this later, leave a comment. We'll check them. And we'll get back to you. There's another question that came in about advertising your BTM. What would be the best way to advertise your Bitcoin ATM machines?
If I were to only do one thing, or just, I mean, I like physical advertisements.
You're on a desert
yeah,
island, and you only get
signs.
two ways to
What?
Go ahead.
Physical signs. Put a physical sign outside, letting people know that the machine's there. Your digital marketing, your Coin ATM radar, your Google Places. Throw up a website, throw up a Facebook group, whatever you can do in order to let people know that there's a machine there. But physical advertising is the best avenue. If you can put a billboard up, pay for it. Signage outside, pay for it. Whatever you can do, it pays for itself.
Hey, I love people from Texas that, I don't know, the way I hear this is, hey, Texas operator here. It sounded like you're already from Texas, but that popped up in the chat, and I'm quoting, remember, this is not a Chain Bites Mike Salvi or nobody endorsement, but it says Texas operator here. It was super easy. I guess this is going back to answering the Texas gentleman's question. It says some of our locations go cold and then they are super hot.
Yeah, it's also cyclical, right? Exactly. You don't know that location just could be in a cold spell, and then the next cycle comes through, and all of a sudden everyone's starting using it. The longer they're there, I can't remember the last time we pulled the machine, frankly. So
yeah, there's so many things that can affect that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you don't want to do is pull out on day 90 and then day 91 a whole Bitcoin.
Well, we have done that. We had a machine in there 6 months, almost did nothing, and then all of a sudden, oh, guess what? School's back in. College was out.
Sure.
Now they're using the machine.
This is a great one, and it ties into the next question. Have you done your market research on demographics and what kind? The answer is yes. But what kind of people do you find are using Bitcoin ATM machines?
We haven't done any official demographics. I think we've looked at some of the customers in some of our operations, and we found older people use the machines. But I don't know if that is the same everywhere. But definitely 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the 80s, people use the machines. They're comfortable with it, being able to do everything at the machine. So that's probably the only demographic I can really identify. Other than that, everyone. I mean, we get kids, we get school teachers, nurses, doctors, truck drivers. It really depends on where the machines are located, but we definitely notice that older people are more comfortable using the machines.
All right. Another question. Man, these people really know their stuff. How did Bitcoin ATMs do during the last Bitcoin bear market?
Pretty well.
Pretty well, you say?
Yeah, I mean, what bear market? I mean, you mean the one like it's
Yeah,
you don't really notice. What's that?
which bear market, right? Right.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, you don't notice it as much. Honestly, you would think more people use the machine when it's going down in price. No, the fear of missing out is definitely a bigger driver. So when it goes back up, you definitely see a lot of new people coming to machines, using the machines. But it's pretty consistent. So I think January, February of this year, we saw a general slowdown across all the Bitcoin ATMs, and then March it picked up again, and now it's crazy. I don't know why. I don't know that it has anything to do with the price of Bitcoin.
Okay. All right. Just going through here, we got to a lot of detailed questions. Scrolling through, a couple more coming in. Anything else you gentlemen want to add? Yes.
No, I mean banking. Think if you're a new operator, banking is going to be a challenge. So think about it up front. Your compliance is where you're going to shine there. That's how you're going to handle banking. If you don't, you're going to struggle with banking.
Yeah, I would say don't get discouraged. You're very likely to run into some banking issues. I think even the more experienced operators that have been doing this even for a couple of years, they all go through at least a time where they've experienced some issues, with banking, and so it's going to happen. So I guess the advice that I would have to you is, one, don't get discouraged. Obviously, keep applying, but once you have one bank account, I'd start on your second and maybe even your third. Never leave, all chance to just one nest egg, or put all your eggs in the single basket of just banking. That you'll always have that financial institution, because again, it only takes, let's say one thing in the industry to happen, and then banks, start to kind of fall like dominoes, and they decide not to support you anymore. I'm hoping that it's the opposite way, and that there's more regulation and bills that really help make banks feel a little bit more comfortable with accepting that they come up with some standard that they all can just agree to, and then banks just widely say, hey, we'd love to bank you. But I don't see that coming anytime soon.
Okay. Here's another compliance question. Can you tell me how compliant your software is with compliance requirements?
Well, in the United States, certainly we comply with everything that we've been asked of. We even put fingerprints and things in there for future proofing it if we wanted to. But typically it's just the standard SMS government ID checks. We're starting operations in other countries that have similar requirements, and so I think if we apply what we've done here, we just haven't had any problems. So we're fully compliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say it's pretty simple for most software companies to go ahead and adapt as time goes on, and as requirements, or new requirements come out. I've seen where Chainbytes has been able to apply those things rather quickly and be able to put those things out. And even some of our requests, in order to make our lives easier in compliance, they're able to make those changes. So as you evaluate vendors, that's a great question that you should be asking the manufacturers of the hardware and the software, and just to make sure. And obviously, from a compliance standpoint, we're going to obviously look at that stuff too, because we're going to need to have a certain subset of data that comes in for us to do our job. And if the machines just frankly can't do that, then it's going to be a non-starter for us in order to provide those compliance services to you, or to be able to provide them within the pricing that we give out generally. Obviously, if your machine's not able to do something and we have to do something manually, and it's very burdensome, if we choose to do that, we might have to charge more for those things. So evaluate, who you're going to be doing business with, and just make sure that those things kind of come together.
Okay. So you mentioned compliance in the US. Will you be offering compliance services in other countries?
We do. We actually currently offer compliance in Canada. And so the regulatory body there is FinTrack. So we're able to do those things in Canada. Obviously, banking that you experienced here in the United States, they have the same issues over in Canada. So if you have a US-based bank for your US-based operation, you're great, right up until you decide to expand over into Canada. And now you've got to find a Canadian bank that wants to do that with you. And you'll have to have a Canadian AML program to kind of support that. So there's those, and then there are other countries that are obviously, you know, starting, you know, to have these Bitcoin ATMs pop up. Most of them do not have, you know, regulations there that are known or have a regulatory body. So you'll want to go ahead and make sure that you sufficiently check those things and engage with legal in those countries to find out, you know, what may be required and who you might need to talk to about it.
Okay. Got a lot of questions coming in, and you know, when it wraps up soon, just to you know, keep this all short and sweet. We talk about this for a week straight. Maybe we'll do a week-long webinar in a couple of weeks. So any other questions that you have, feel free to contact us through chainblades.com. But I do want to address one more question that came in, because this is pretty important. This is what most operators want to know as far as profitability goes. Is there, what are the typical average fees? Because I don't think we even said this once on the call. On this, is what are the typical average fees that most BTM operators are charging in their machines?
Oh, well, it's all over the place. Coin ATM Radar every now and then comes up with a number. I think it was 15 to 20% last time. I haven't really kept up with it, but that's pretty much what we see.
But that's left at the discretion of the operator, correct?
Yeah, they can charge whatever they want. So they should look at what their market has already and be competitive. Yeah.
Okay.
I spoke to over 12 operators last week, and I always ask because I also find this very interesting. And the lowest last week that I heard was 6% that someone was charging, and they were doing that to remain very, very competitive in their space and take business away because they had a lot of Bitcoin ATMs in their area. And then the highest I heard was 22%. And that person had absolutely no qualms and was very happy with charging 22%. So it varies greatly.
Okay. All right. Well, wrapping up. Any other, like I said, any other questions that you have, you can always contact us through chainblades.com or btmcompliance.com. Do you see these beautiful machines behind me? Okay. These I've had wrapped. Okay. I came up with this entire design. I'm lying to you, but no, the machines don't come like this. They come, you know, white labeled. You can get whatever. These are our models behind us. These are the machines without the top screens. All the prices are on the website. Feel free to contact us. They're wonderful. You can even put your face on it. You have to work that out on your. Thanks for joining us. Leave comments. Share the video too. And any other parting words, gentlemen?
I think we have one more question, James.
Here it comes. Yeah, I just gotta wait in all caps. How can we contact BTM Compliance? Well, you can contact BTM Compliance at btmcompliance.com. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing it with us. We just got to thank you for your time.
Yeah, and somebody asked about adding check cashing money transfer to their BTMs. I mean, again, there's way more money in this industry than any one of those other industries. So I would ask you why you would want to add that complexity regulatory wise. And the upside isn't as good, but you could talk to us.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Any other questions, let us know. Jeremy Snyder, Eric Grill, Mike Stalvey, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks for coming.
All right.